Hello, and welcome to the East Africa Business Podcast. I'm Sam Floy, and I'm here on the continent to learn about the emerging business scene. I'll be interviewing startups, investors, and organisations who are all playing their part in helping the region develop and grow. And in doing this podcast, I'll be sharing with you the things that I learn along the way. In this episode, I chat with Flavia Howard about all things irrigation. We go through an overview of technology and agriculture in the region, and how there appears to be some incredibly compelling economics around introducing irrigation across farmland here. Around halfway through, we have to switch rooms, which somewhat distorts the audio, but please don't let that distract you from what is a super informative conversation. Flavia, welcome to the show.
Thanks, hi.
Cool, so we're here today to talk about irrigation systems. Could you give us a bit of background about who you are and how you ended up being in Rwanda looking at this?
Yeah, so I was doing management consulting in London and really wanted to get out and do something a bit more fulfilling with my skills, and came out to work with an innovation hub looking at different market problems in agriculture in Rwanda. And I very quickly focused down on irrigation being something that was really, really underdeveloped in Rwanda. There's enormous potential. Farmers are in enormous need of irrigation, but there wasn't really anything happening. So I've been spending the last few months investigating the sector, looking at the various problems and challenges and opportunities with a view to starting a business in the irrigation sector in Rwanda.
All right. So what's been the main learning that you found?
The main thing is just really the scale of the issue, in that there is there's two growing seasons in Rwanda, and there's a whole kind of 4 months of the year in the dry season where farmers can't grow anything, they can't get any income, but there's loads of lakes in Rwanda, and actually if they could just get that water out of the lake and onto their farm, then they could grow a whole nother season of crops and get so much more income. So it's a really kind of untapped opportunity to make a massive difference.
I see. So basically at the moment there is no sort of formal irrigation system. So irrigation, just so I make it unclear, is basically taking water and putting it on the fields.
Yeah, it's essentially kind of artificially getting water onto the land. And for the most part, that's done by pumping, petrol pumps, solar pumps, which I'm sure we'll talk about in a bit. And there's also kind of much bigger government systems. So the only irrigation that was really existing in Rwanda before was enormous irrigation projects, where the government and various donors are redeveloping an entire valley. They're building a dam, they're doing massive construction. And obviously that's not affordable to your average farmer. So a few of them were buying petrol pumps and kind of pumping from the lake up onto their field. But it's enormously expensive. The petrol pumps are costing, a few $100s just to buy. But then a farmer who's earning very little income is paying, could be up to $10 a day just in petrol costs. So it's really, really prohibitive to your average farmer who's just got, less than a hectare of land to actually irrigate at all.
So what do these petrol pumps look like?
It's really kind of like a metal cage, size of, size of a big TV, I guess. And they carry it around, and full of pipes and very, very complicated machinery. It's another big issue, is that there isn't anyone who's got the expertise to fix them. So they break down and that's it. I spoke to so many farmers who say, oh yeah, well someone donated us a petrol pump 4 years ago and it's been sitting in the shed for the last 3 because we can't fix it.
See, so where do they, so I'm still quite so where does the water come from? So they've got this pump, and do they go down into the ground, or do they? No,
so for the most part it's to lakes and rivers. So although there's this very long dry season, Rwanda isn't a water poor country. It's not desert, it's not struggling for water. It's just where the water is located. So especially if you look at the east, there are loads and loads of lakes, very, very kind of elaborate networks of lakes and rivers close to the land. So the water's there throughout the year. It's just not falling from the sky, it's sitting in lakes. So the challenge for the farmers is, how do we get that water from the lake up onto the farm?
See, and so what do they put pipes into the lake and then run the petrol pump, and then that sort of sucks it all up and squirts it out?
Yeah, and that sucks it and pumps it up the other end. So then if they've got a lot of money, they can afford the irrigation systems, which most people will think of as the big sprinklers going around. For the most part, they can't afford that. So it will just be a farmer standing there with a hose, literally going around plot to plot, irrigating his tomatoes or whatever.
See, and so how many, what percentage of farmers are using this sort of petrol pump?
About 2%.
2%, okay.
It's very, very small because the cost is so prohibitive.
And so the rest of them in the dry season, they just have no...
They just have no income. Yeah.
Wow.
This is why it's such an untapped kind of potential. If you can find a way to get farmers irrigating cheaply, you'll drastically increase their incomes.
See, so what have been the current sort of ways of trying to solve this?
So this is what I've been really looking at, how can we do that? And the answer, in my opinion, is the solar pump. There's a fantastic company based in Kenya called Future Pump, which has invented a low-cost solar pump solution. Now, the cost of solar panels has reduced dramatically in the last, 30 years, but even in the last 5 years, the cost has come down so much that it is now, affordable and efficient to make a small solar pump, a small solar panel, much like the solar panels that are, that are going on the home electricity systems. But to attach that to a pump, they've designed a pump that is very, very simple, very efficient, about the same size as a petrol pump, and only slightly more expensive, actually, if about the same price. But of course, once you've got a solar panel on there, you don't have any running costs. So suddenly the farmer isn't thinking, I've got to pay all this and then I've got to pay $10 a day in petrol. Once they've got the pump, that's it. And they can use it every single day for nothing. So they can irrigate their crops the whole year round. I mean, that means that even in the wet season, now the rains can be quite inconsistent. All of the farmers we spoke to are reporting that climate change is an issue. The rains are less consistent, less reliable. Out in the east in Rwanda, there's been a drought pretty much every season for the last 12 months. So that farmers, they could have this, and every day the rains don't come, they've got a free option using the solar panel, using the solar pump to irrigate their land.
Amazing. So this is they're putting the pipes into the lake, mm-hmm. and it's the solar energy that is being generated is the one that's again sucking up the water in.
Yeah, and running. So the design of this particular solar pump is very similar to the petrol pump in the design. It's really designed to replace that technology. So there's a pipe into the water, sucks up the water, which runs through the pump, and then a pipe the other side, which goes out onto the field. It's very much targeted at smallholder farmers, and it's really where the gap is at the moment. Big farmers, who've got 50 acres, 100 acres on big commercial farms can afford to get, acres worth of solar panels and these enormous generators and pumps. But that's just not possible for the smallholder farmers. So this is really trying to get that solar technology working for smallholder farmers.
So, I mean, can these smallholder farmers, can they afford this solar panel, this solar pump?
So it's still a challenge for farmers. It's a big outlay of money for them. It is affordable. The payback, they get paid back over just one season. If they can farm in that dry season, then they've made their money back in one season. However, of course, the challenge is to have that money in the first place. So what we're doing is working with a solar technology company, putting GSM chips into the solar panels.
What's that GSM?
So GSM is a chip which is installed in the back of the solar panel, which remotely tracks and monitors the data, which means that you can control the solar panel remotely. So a company called Steamaco develops these chips. They've been using it in microgrids in Kenya. Microgrids are like community electricity points. They're now putting that technology into these solar pumps so that you can monitor and track them. And that also means you can connect it with mobile money so that farmers can pay a down payment via mobile money. They can take the pump away onto their farm, and they can then make daily, weekly or monthly payments via mobile money. And every time they make a payment, the pump is unlocked. If they start failing to make their payments, if they're not kind of meeting their repayment schedule, then you can just switch off their solar panel. And that means that they can't use their pump. So, of course, there's a massive incentive for them to make the payments. It's a model which is very similar to Bbox and Mobisol and the kind of home solar systems. But this is just taking that idea and that technology and putting it into the agricultural setting.
Okay, so how much, you say they could pay back over a season? So, like, how much are they paying each time they use it, kind of thing?
The method that I'm looking to use would be a down payment of, I'm trying to put this into pounds, down payment of about £100, and then a daily payment of £1 a day. So if they're really, which is obviously a lot cheaper than the petrol that we're looking at, and it means that if they can only afford to pay every day, then that's fine. They pay for one day, and the pump is turned on for that one day, and they can stand in their field irrigating. What we actually want to encourage people to do is pay £20 a month, and that will be then unlocked for the whole month, and they can stand and irrigate every single day. It's like pay for 20 days and get 10 free. So we're trying to incentivize farmers to actually pay more consistently and pay on a monthly basis and have more usage. If they make a daily payment, then they'll repay that back to the pump over 2 years, and if they're paying monthly, they'll repay it in 1 year.
And at the moment, to say how many months a year are they currently farming?
Well, at the moment, they're really just kind of, 3 to 4 months in season A and 3 to 4 months in season B, and then the May to August is kind of fallow, is the dry season. So if we can get farmers irrigating during that dry season, then they should get complete payback. Which certainly within the 12 months it is affordable. Obviously they've got other commitments on their money, and we are trying to structure this payment system so that it is affordable for the farmers, and it is going to increase the access and availability for those on low incomes. Okay,
what are the other typical outgoings that they have?
Well, for a farmer, it's things like the seed, fertilizer, pesticides, also just labour. A lot of them will work in cooperatives and, will employ casual labour, especially for things like taking the produce to market. Then they do have other things, a lot of them we've spoken to have got these solar home systems. They also want to have electricity for their homes. And school fees are a big expense. Really, a lot of farmers wanting to make sure they're sending their children to school and saving for their children's futures.
And so so those are the outgoings, but what are the main income? So is pretty much all of their income comes from the produce they sell?
Yeah, certainly the farmers that we're looking at and speaking to are those, who have a hectare of land or less. So very restricted incomes. And all of their income is coming from the farm. Typically they will, it varies across the size of land and whether or not they're in cooperatives, but, about 50% of their crops they will keep for home consumption, and the rest they will sell.
Yeah, and the types of farmers that you're working with are then, what produce are they farming?
So for the most part, it'll be vegetable farmers. That's simply because the crop sizes tend to be smaller, and this is a pump which can't do 50 hectares. It's focused on less than a hectare.
So just a hectare in like football pitch.
It's 1 hectare is 2.47 acres. So if people say an acre is a football pitch, that gives you an idea.
Okay, cool. So most people have like 2 to 3 football pitches worth of.
Actually, in Rwanda, most people have a lot less than that, more like half or a third. Yeah. Okay. So really, that's why it's designed for the typical Rwandan farmer who does have small lots of land. Often they group together in cooperatives, and therefore they will have more. But those with smaller land, the biggest crops here are the maize and beans, but you need a lot more land to farm those. Also, they're not as profitable. So we're really looking at farmers who farm vegetables, because their payback will be much quicker. And they will be much more likely to be able to afford the solar pump. So they're kind of the quick wins, and then over time we want to help those maize and bean farmers as well, but they might find it more difficult financially.
Okay, this might be a silly question, but if it's more profitable to farm vegetables, why don't all farmers do that?
I think it's really because maize and beans are the staple crops of Rwanda, and farming them is very well known and very well understood. And vegetables just aren't as common. There isn't the market for them as much, nor the skills to know how to do it.
Okay, so is it do the vegetable farmers, have they typically been taught by? Do they go to like vegetable school? Like who teaches them?
Yeah, there's a farmer program which is led by the government called Tugiri Muhinzi, which trains lead farmers in communities to in kind of best practice farming methods in a variety of crops, so not just vegetables. And they're all over the country now, 2,500 lead farmers. And about 250,000 farmers are benefiting from being in this kind of best practice groups. And actually working with these lead farmers is a way that we're hoping to spread a kind of good irrigation practice and to teach farmers about our solar pumps. Because there's very limited knowledge as well on how to use a solar pump for sure, but how to do any kind of irrigation. It's not really been done here before. So we're looking to work with these kind of lead farmers, expert farmers who are very well respected in their communities to spread the message.
I see. What are the key learnings from how to grow vegetables?
How to grow vegetables? Well, I'm afraid I'm not an agronomist, but I think what they're really learning is things like crop spacing, growth periods, growth times, how to diagnose particular pests or diseases, those kind of lessons.
And Rwanda is kind of known for being very hilly. Mm-hmm. Does that factor into the types of things that farmers can grow here, and sort of how that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you find that in the very hilly western region, it's kind of tea and coffee and potatoes on the slopes by the national parks. In the west, it's much flatter, it's much drier, although there are all those lakes, so it's a lot more staple crops, the maize, the beans. It really does vary. And in the valleys, right in the river valleys, there's a lot of rice growing as well. So it really does make a difference.
And so if you're saying that with better irrigation, farmers can sort of be farming all year round, will that affect the types of produce they're farming, or will they change the crops that they're doing based on the different seasons? Yeah,
well, farmers do rotate crops. I think a lot of the farmers that I've encountered tend to do kind of maize season A and then beans or soya in season B. And I think the kind of revelation in a way that we're trying to introduce them to is the whole concept of you can have a season C, and in that season C, tomatoes take about 3 months to grow. Why not grow tomatoes in your season C? So we're not in a way trying to completely change their habits. We're just saying that you can actually have a whole new season of growth in that time.
Yeah, and what's how easy will it be for someone to go from never having made tomatoes to being able to sell them? Is it quite simple to get the tomatoes to market?
Getting the access to market is a big challenge in Rwanda, and it's something that we're looking at. Certainly, those kind of markets and networks aren't very well developed. Distribution is a really big problem. Most people carry their produce on their head and walk to the market. Distribution is certainly a challenge, and actually, educating farmers about how and where to sell them and how to get the best price for their goods is a challenge.
So what's the current? If we had to pick like a typical farmer, how often are they going to market and selling their produce?
Well, obviously, it depends on the crop and the season, and with something like tomatoes, they will grow mature over a period of weeks. So it will be, according to when the crops are ready, they have to go by that.
Okay. So
and that's I'm just saying. Then that can also be a big challenge in terms of the prices, because it means that when you're dictated by the seasons so heavily as they are by the rains, it means that all of their crops for every farmer in the region is maturing at around the same time, which is forcing the prices down. So as soon as you can help farmers to irrigate, they can start their growing of tomatoes 3 weeks earlier than everyone else who's reliant on the rains, which means their tomatoes will be ready for market before everyone else, which means they'll get a much better price.
I see. So it sort of like smooths out when the supply hits the market.
Absolutely.
Okay, got it. And who are they selling directly to consumers, or who are they? When they go to market, who are they selling it to?
I think that really depends on their proximity to an urban centre. I think for the most part it will be local markets, and then local markets selling to the bigger ones, and it depends on really how close they are. For the most part, it will be easy. If they are walking to market, they will walk to their closest one.
Is there any sort of any of the stuff, is it sold through supermarkets or through any sort of branded? Is there any sort of branding in the vegetable market or the produce they sell?
Yeah, there's a few Kenyan supermarkets who've broken into the market here. Now, I have to say I'm not sure on that one, but I suspect that they are buying from much bigger producers. It's a lot more complex for those big bulk buyers to buy from smallholder farmers, simply because they won't be producing the volumes required.
Okay. And so these, going back to the solar irrigation systems, do you think in sort of the next 3-5 years' time, will it just be that all small farmers will be using it, or do you think that larger people who are currently using other irrigation systems will then switch over to this type of method?
Yeah, well, the solar pump that I'm looking to sell is very specific on the smallholder farmer. Now, I think that the capacity and the models of that pump will increase to do larger plots of land, but the focus will remain on the smallholder farmer. For the bigger, more commercial farms, I think that there's already being seen a shift to solar, and I don't think you'd find really big new irrigation projects are very rarely now looking at petrol just because of those running costs. There's a commercial farm to the east in Rwanda, which is currently looking to shift over from a very, very expensive petrol system over to solar panels for their 540 hectare farm, because it's just not sustainable. And when you're looking at those kind of sizes of land, you need about 8 hectares worth of solar panels. So it's a big undertaking, but the long-term payback is there. There is a general shift in the market towards solar, away from petrol. It's just the running costs just aren't sustainable. So, for example, a big commercial farm out in the east of Rwanda, it's got about 540 hectares, and they're currently trying to irrigate a large proportion of that through a big petrol system, and it's just not sustainable. So they're gradually shifting over to solar, and I don't think you'd find very many new irrigation projects anywhere on the continent which are looking to focus on petrol, just because it's not sustainable.
Yeah, are there any sort of technical considerations with setting up a solar irrigation system that is that big?
Well, yeah, absolutely. There are issues, and maintenance is a very key consideration when designing any kind of solar system. And one of the things that we're really focusing on is making sure that we've got the technical expertise in country, to have someone come over who knows how to work not just the pump, but also the solar panel and all of that kind of technology. It definitely is a consideration, but equally it's a consideration for petrol pumps, and you need to have mechanics who can fix those just as well.
In very simple terms, is it just that you have a solar panel and that then generates energy, and then that energy is what's used to sort of power the whole thing? Yes,
absolutely. Now the pump that I'm looking at is much simpler, and it's just a basic hydran pump, wheel rotating round, so it's a lot simpler. A lot of other solar panel or solar pumps on the market are really just about, let's connect a solar panel to a kind of electric pump, which isn't really kind of taking it down. It's really kind of cutting corners, and I really like this pump in particular because it is exceptionally simple, and any farmer with basic training, as we are providing them with, is able to fix it.
And are there farmers using this in other countries at the moment?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's been field tested in Kenya for the last couple of years, very successfully around Kisumu, and they're just reaching out to distribute in other countries. So Uganda, Tanzania for 2 starters, and also looking elsewhere in the continent, Zambia, and even they've done some field testing in Nepal, in Honduras. So it's really beginning to spread.
And what are what makes Rwanda different to those countries when you look at how the solar pump might be adopted?
Well, Rwanda's got a very interesting case because there's the support of the government behind it. And the government's doing a 50% subsidy for smallholder farmers. They're really kind of recognising the gap in the market and providing that subsidy to any farmer who's got a small holding of land and wants to irrigate. So we're hoping to capitalise on that by working with the government to reduce the cost for farmers.
And in other countries, are they going to be growing the same types of crop?
Well, I think as with anything, it varies. In the region, certainly, the focus is on vegetable farmers. I can't really speak for Nepal and Honduras, but I'd imagine it's the similar kind of, small plots and high value crops.
And so if you were to sort of fast forward maybe 5 years, what do you think the sort of agricultural scene will look like in terms of, do you think farms will still be having 2 fallow seasons?
I don't think so, no. I mean, I think if this can be successful, it will demonstrate that, that farmers can get a lot higher value from their produce, not just by using the dry season, but also by improving the yields in the wet season. As rains become and are likely to become more and more inconsistent, they can really improve their incomes. Once you're getting to that level of lots of people irrigating, then obviously shared use of water resources is going to become a challenge, and that's got to be properly managed. But I think if this pump can be used by a large proportion of those just living around, lakes and rivers even, then we can move on to the bigger challenges of tackling those who might need boreholes or who aren't close to water sources, who don't have lakes and rivers. There's potential for this pump to be used as an asset that farmers can say, look, I've paid off my pump. We can have an interaction with them which shows about their payment history, and we can help them to buy more complicated equipment, more expensive items, rainwater harvesting, rain filtration. We can help them provide water for their homes. There's a lot of potential, and this is really just an entry point to a whole host of products and water or agriculture related that we can work with farmers on.
I see. So it's not just about the irrigation pump. There's a whole load of other kit that they can.
Well, not yet. This is my bright idea, but no one is yet doing that. This is very new technology. It's only been early this year that this kind of pay-as-you-go technology has been used with an irrigation pump. So this would be it's kind of the long-term vision is to use that as a way of helping farmers access more capital.
Is there a danger that if loads of people start irrigating a lake, the lake just runs out of water?
Yes, I mean that would be very extreme for it to happen with a lake. But yeah, coming back to what I said about shared use of water resources, it is an issue, and certainly for the rivers in particular, because some in Rwanda do dry up in the dry season, and yes, there's a risk that even those that don't, if everyone's irrigating on them, then yes, they start drying up. So that is a risk, and it's something that, in the short term, there's enough water. Longer term, it's something that will have to be examined, with government who's got the kind of regulations on what you can and can't do around water resources.
Have there been any particularly successful case studies of shared water irrigation?
Well, certainly not in Rwanda that I'm aware of.
But is this a sort of like in, if you used to look to more developed economies, how do they sort of manage this sort of thing?
Yeah, I mean, shared water resources and water management plans are a huge aspect of kind of government policy and planning, and, water challenges, I think globally, people recognising that it is going to be an increasing risk and increasing challenge as populations grow and with urban densities, etc. So yeah, I think that's certainly something that the high level people globally are looking at, global summits, etc., frequently touching on that as a challenge.
Okay, and it comes down through regulation rather than I'm trying to work out if there's any what the system is to make sure that if you've got a river, it doesn't run out of water. Is it that the government comes in and they say X amount of water is allowed to be extracted from the river, or is it sort of people are left to their own devices and they'll sort of self-regulate?
Well, I guess if people are left to their own devices, that's the risk, because it's shared, because it's a common resource, a common good, that it's overexploited. Especially when you're looking at rivers that run through multiple countries, it really does become a need for collaboration across governments, not just within kind of property owners of land around a river. It has to be something which is shared and agreed upon, because otherwise exploitation becomes an issue.
So has there been any resistance to setting up a solar powered irrigation pump? As in, it seems like, from everything you said, it seems a great idea. Why might people think it's a bad idea?
So there are certain challenges around farmers being used to petrol pumps. Now, you for the most part, you put in petrol and the same amount of water will come out, provided there aren't any problems. Getting farmers used to the idea that the pump is going to be more powerful in the middle of the day when the sunshine is brighter, and that, if a big cloud comes overhead, well then it's, the amount of water coming out is going to drastically reduce. That is a learning path, and farmers saying, well, I want to irrigate now, why can't I irrigate now? And that is a challenge. And yeah, it can be a restriction for them. For the most part, we've been trying to explain it, well, if it's really sunny, you need the water. If it's really, really cloudy, then it's probably about to rain, and therefore you don't need the pump anyway. But still, that's certainly a learning. It's just really the newness of the technology that's a challenge for a lot of farmers, certainly. But we've had a very, very positive reception from most other people that we've encountered.
Yeah, are they generally quite open to sort of trying out new technologies, do you find?
Absolutely, yeah. The farmers we've spoken to, especially when you can make the argument and say you're going to save $10 a day in petrol, you can't argue with that. Everyone's very interested. Yeah. Cool.
So, just a couple more questions. So you think that in the next few years, this is going to become sort of quite commonplace? And I saw you sort of briefly touched upon if they get access to a sort of a formal system like this, it could then open them up to other aspects of improving their sort of setup. What are some of those other improvements that they could get? Would it just be in the agriculture space, or will they then get access to other areas of their life?
I think specialising in agricultural solutions is the way to go. There are companies doing great things in terms of solar power for the home. But using the pump to finance things like water tanks can be very expensive, and other irrigation equipment like the sprinklers, drip irrigation, which is the pipes laid on top of the soil which drip into the land. And as I said, the rainwater harvesting is a big opportunity here. And even, for farmers that aren't close to lakes and rivers, supporting them to dig boreholes, etc., is really a real potential.
Okay, so you think that in years to come it'll be this is the sort of the low-hanging fruit, so to speak, and there's much more to go for that.
Yeah, there is much more, and there are certain restrictions. Irrigating on very steep land, you also have to be careful things like the soil erosion. But yeah, that's absolutely what we're trying to do with this pump, is to reach those farmers who are close to lakes with low-lying land, but can't actually irrigate. Those are the people we can immediately help, and then from there we can kind of move on to the more complex customers.
Fantastic. Well, Flavia, thank you so much for that. If anyone wants to sort of follow your story or hear more, what's the best way they can get in touch?
Best way is to just Google Future Pump, or find us on Twitter. Future Pump are the manufacturers of the product, and that's spreading all over the continent.
Cool. Well, Flavia, thanks so much. And really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Before we head, just a quick moment to say thank you for listening. Starting a podcast is tough, and so I appreciate you making it through to the end. One thing that would be fantastic is, if you're enjoying it, to leave a review on iTunes. Apparently, good stuff happens when you do. Head to samfloy.com/review, and you can see the link. It should only take a minute or so. Otherwise, have a great week, and speak to you soon.